all of us to understand. And really, Dr. Ramamurthy, Athya, Amar, and Keki has already shown this. Number one, why do we rupture the capsule? You must understand that. Principle is to simplify. There are two ways. One, as I showed, the surge, sudden surge, and the capsule will present to it. That's not very frequent because we all are aware of that. And to do that, you need to have a low vacuum. But the most common in my experience is the aspiration flow rate. Aspiration flow rate or higher vacuum in the venturi system will attract the capsule even when you're removing the lens material as the tip is not totally occluded. So high aspiration flow rate like 30 plus is more vulnerable to PCR. So be careful if you're using anything of that kind and have an appropriate control and appropriate bottle height. That's number one. Number 2 point I wanted to, we saw some films, and I've done it many times, when the capsule is split, we put the lens in. Most of the time you're okay, but if you can convert that, having done good vitrectomy under triamcinolone, and convert and give some strength of a Rex's conversion in one side, other side, it will hold that lens better. Because if there's an uncontrolled tear and you put the lens in the eye, either on table or later on, it can. Most of the time it will not. So if you can convert it, try to remember that. And finally, be careful about putting single piece in ciliary sulcus, particularly if it is acrysoft or hydrophobic, but that applies even to the hydrophilic. Quite often I have repented putting single piece. So put 3 piece as DR is shown so well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. While we have, I'll just show you a thing here. Look at this first clipping which I thought I'll show you here. We are injecting viscoelastic. And when I injected viscoelastic, you can notice the desmase has detached. This is a partial desmase detachment. Now the problem comes, what do I do now? So you can see now I'm trying to inject some viscoelastic back to fix that previous desmase which I've already created back into place. Now I have to continue the surgery. Now in such a case, you have to be very careful that you work on the side opposite the desmase detachment. So I'm finishing my rexis. While I'm finishing my rexis, you will notice I'm also injecting some viscoelastic so that my detachment goes back to position. Now, next step is I go in for hydrodissection, and you can see once I'm doing hydrodissection, I want to then take off into the nucleus portion. Before that, again I'm using some viscoelastic so that my desmase does not move more to the center. I'm struggling a little bit in the phaco portion at this stage, and you can see a little bit of iris again getting caught. Again, I'm struggling a bit in my chopping. Once that's there, what I do is inject some more viscoelastic, and I'm trying to bring this nucleus out of the bag. Once I'm out of the bag, I'll be much safer, but in this case, it's not happened because my hydrodissection has not gone so well. So you can see I'm continuing the phaco, but now, once my nucleus has been done on one side, the desmase is on that side, the fluid is also helping me keep my desmase back in position. Once my fluid stops, you can see the desmase again coming back. I go in for the IA, and once I have done that, I will then implant the intraocular lens. Now, I'm implanting the intraocular lens there, but remember, I want a good tamponade inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a suture so that my air does not come out. And once the suture is ready, I will then remove the viscoelastic, suture up, put in air, and now let me see how this patient behaved at the end of surgery. So this is the same patient, 1 month post-op. You can see the patient has improved well, and you can see on a slit lamp picture, and I'll show you here, that's where the desmase detachment occurred. Look at the second case. I created a desmetorexis, and by mistake, I removed it then, stained it with trypan blue, finished the phaco, and implanted this iatrogenic desmetorexis back inside the eye. Now remember the same principle like I showed you in PDEC. This is only thing is you're doing an iatrogenic DMEC has happened. I'm now going to unroll this iatrogenic desmetorexis which I have done, and I'm trying to fix it back in the exact geographic position. How did it happen? When I injected viscoelastic, my desmase went down and I did a desmotorexis rather than a capsulorexis. Now you can see this graft getting fixed back with the air tamponading effect. And that's how the case looks when it is complete. Now if you thought this was bad, you should see the last one, but I'm now injecting viscoelastic and pushing back by mistake the desmase, and you can see I'm doing a desmotorexis. Moral of this whole clipping which I'm showing you is, you have to be careful when you're injecting the viscoelastic. So now I go in, finish my capsulorexis. Here the mistake what happened was, I did not realize this, so my whole desmotorexis came en bloc out. This was published in the JCRS 2006 issue. This was a patient post-op day 1. This was a VIP patient whose relative was a newspaper reporter. And you can imagine, when they came to me, I told them, everything will go well. And when this happened, post-op day 1, this is how the patient looked. I told them, no, it will become all right, it will become all right. And then, to my dismay, this was post-op day 3, white cornea. So I told the patient, listen, you go back home, come to see me after 2 months, because I knew this patient was going to eat my head otherwise, and I didn't know what I could do more. To my surprise, this is what happened later on. There was polymegathism and pleomorphism, and believe it or not, this is how the patient looked when the patient came back a couple of months later, and you can see the patient improved to 6/6 vision. This was subsequently published in the JCRS. We also decided to classify desmase detachment, but that complication which occurred, to be honest, was fully mine, and no credit I can take for making that patient all right. Desmase detachment we classified like rhegmatogenous desmase, tractional desmase, bullous, and a complex desmase detachment. Saying that, this is what I thought I'll show you on desmase detachment, and Keki was going to show us a little bit of clipping on posterior polar also to end this session. Yes, Keki?
Posterior polar cataracts, they break, they drop. Dr. Vasavada has published papers showing almost 18 to 20% of these cases can land up with difficulty. Let me show you a new way which I have developed. We have now done 56 in a row without a single break. I call it anterior segment fluid flow to eliminate the scourge of posterior polar cataracts. It's a new technique. It may sound a little incredible, but just see it. Problem always has been with the slightest hydrodissection of fluid inflow, the posterior capsule gives way. Nucleus dunks in, and that is one of the big problems. The answer is pretty simple if you think about it. If you can give pressure from behind to support it, so the posterior capsule doesn't go up and down, it remains stable. So what I developed was a 3-way connection between the handpiece and the fluid line to the posterior chamber. It's a short little animation which will just show you how the system really works. Here you get the handpiece which is there, can have a pointer, and on the side attached to the edge of the handpiece is a triple little flow with a valve. The whole idea being that when fluid flows in and you don't support it, the little part drops inside the eye. On the other hand, if you got fluid which is inflowing from both sides, then you will notice that the area will remain influid. So you have a fluid coming from your phaco handpiece, a 3-piece with a little valves at the side to control the quantum of flow which comes out. That is controlled and fed inside at the side. But the drop should only be 1 drop every 5 seconds. 1 drop every 5 seconds. All you need to do is to make a little opening at the center. This is a posterior polar. When the posterior polar looks like the knob of your car, gear shift, you know it's going to break and fall. Be careful with these. All you need to do is to inflow this. Now remember, the flow here is very slow. It is a drop every 5 seconds. Now there's really no hassles, no difficulty. You do start your procedure as you would normally start with no difficulty whatsoever. You go ahead. I use diamonds as a regular routine, not for any other reason, excepting I believe it gives me a better and a squarer incision. And then you do your rexes. You can do a nice generous rexes. You don't have to bother doing small rexes. with using this posterior float method, life suddenly becomes very comfortable. So you do it. Now, the rule as far as posterior polar is you never hydrodissect. I say that is rubbish. If you can support the posterior base, you can hydrodissect at your heart's content. Now, the fluid inflow starts from the back and you are hydrodissecting comfortably. Notice that the chamber tends to shallow because of the little posterior pressure from behind. There is no risk of breakage because the support is there. So you can peacefully do a little bit of hydrodissection, remove it out. Phaco running, same time as it occurs with the back. What I want you to look at the back here. You will notice that that part moves forward. So you are doing it basically with a low suction, low inflow fluid, standard techniques used, but you have no longer any worries. It cannot drop in no matter what you try. It will support it. Disadvantage of the procedure, pupil tends to narrow a little. Don't be worried about that. That is part of the procedure, it occurs. So here everything is then over. You can then just simply do an IA, remove it, and the problem is solved by itself. So your posterior inflow of that one drop every 5 seconds, graded to that, works like a dream. You will ask me, why this every 5 seconds? I've made all the mistakes I've made and I've done them for you, so don't repeat them again. Just follow what I'm saying. So this is the procedure, and at the end of it, you will be able to manage to get away comfortably. You will notice the little opening which is still there in the middle. It doesn't bother you because the opening is there, but since the pressure was there, the lens cannot fall in. It will only remain on the surface. You just, all you then have to do is inject your lens inside. But since you have got a little opening running there, you have to be careful when you inject it in that you don't have a problem. You can settle your lens in comfortably into place, get it gradually to move in. This is a Rayner lens, so there's really no hassle. And the system works very easily and very simply. So it's a great system. Let us see it again on a difficult case. This time we concentrate on the posterior polar cataract. And I want you to notice the posterior polar cataract. It flickers, it moves, it waves in the breeze, but it doesn't show, showing that this system, what I call as a balancing act, is a good system and it works. So just look at that back. This is your posterior polar cataract sitting there. It's also got a little knob. Same system once again. I'm going to show it you a little slower so that you can see and apply it to yourself. You just have to fixate it in. This is a 23 gauge unit which is being used. Mark it in. Same way, proceed. No hassles, no great difficulty, no great show. All just remember to plug this in. Once you plug it in, don't unplug it. Do your rexes, generous rexes, no problems, no difficulty. If you are worried about it, stay in your rexes, it makes life easier. Do a little hydrodissection, don't be worried, but just make sure your inflow starts off. And now look at that central part where I'm saying. Now as I go on doing it, you will notice the center part starts to flicker. It literally shimmers like a breeze in the wind. That is that central area which is sitting there. No hassles. You will notice the edge will start to tear a little. No hassles. It cannot drop in. So that problem of yours is ended permanently. You then just have to proceed with this system. You use your IA, you can remove it, and in the end, you will notice the central area has got a little hole in the middle here. Had you not used this balance system, this lens, sure as blazes and sure as the good Lord made little babies, would have made its dive. But here you can cleanly dissect it off with no hassles, leaving you a little stain in the middle, showing you the weak spots which are there. Don't try polishing it, though I'm trying to demonstrate it for fun. Don't do it. And then at the end of it, all you need to do is just remove it, tickle it, inject your lens, and the problem goes away. This is a toric lens which you have put inside. You can never fit a toric lens in the posterior polar because half the time the thing just goes for a foot. So when you are faced with a posterior polar in future, use this combination system, but remember to set the flow at 5 or drop every 5 seconds. It's a simple principle. Measure the anterior and posterior flow. It gives great results. Thank you, Amar, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Keki. And once again, thanks all of you for coming for this session. I'd like to thank Ramamurthy for giving us this session. Abhay, Keki, Atya, everyone. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day.
Good afternoon. I know all of you are hungry. We are going to have the AIOC session. Thanks to Dr. Ramurthy, Chairman Scientific Committee, for naming this conference as AIOC Diamond Jubilee Conference. And the reason is there are three academic wings of All India Ophthalmic Society, the Scientific Committee, the Editor Proceedings, and Editor Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. And I'm happy that Governing Council and the Chairman Scientific Committee decided. It's the reason is several journals in the world are not as old as the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. So hi, how are you? Thank you for coming. No, thanks for you have some short about me. Yeah.
Now you can
Okay.
say I work in Hong Kong and Melbourne.
Okay.
For the AIOC.
You're going to sit with me, huh?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I think I'm a panelist in this.
Yes, yes, please. Can I have the slides? So I have yeah. David is not here. We will use it for panel discussion. So we are having Dr. Vishali Gupta here and Dr. Vishal Janji, who is a cornea expert from. Can you have Dr. Vishali's presentation first? The other podium.
Yes, sir.
No, Dr. Vishali can have it first. Her talk is first.
I have already given the presentations.
And we also have supposed to have Dr. Santosh over here. And Dr. David Pellis is not here. We'll use the time for discussion. Mr. Sundarajan has given the presentation. Any idea?
Take USB.
Okay. Let us have some tea.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Instead of Sundarajan, are you presenting? No, who's presenting? You are given your presentation?
Yes, correct.
Okay, you can talk to them because
But I have already given the presentation.
We met before.
yes,
AIOC.
that's right. With my good friend
This one, open it.
Saida.
I'll present it from here.
So Dr. Vishali is a professor from PGI Chandigarh and now professor in King College in King College Hospital in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Dr. Natarajan.
Vishali, I apologize for I don't know whether Ramu has the time, but I'm happy he's here. I apologize for the lunch time.
Thank you. My topic for today is traditional journal publishing. Is it a thing of past? Now, the first question is, what is traditional publishing? It basically means how scholars find information, create knowledge, and communicate it amongst themselves, with students, and beyond the academy with other audience. How the concept of publishing began. It was way back in 17th centuries when scholars would actually meet and they would present and discuss their papers and their ideas. And they had correspondence with each other in private letter. But then as the correspondence and the number of the scholars increased, they wanted to have something which could be published, and that's how scholarly journals emerged. The first scholarly journal actually came way back in 1665, when the president or the secretary of the Royal Society initiated the first journal publication, and this is what it looked like. This was called the Philosophical Transactions of Royal Society, and it was free of any charge. Between 18th to 19th century, several specialized disciplines appeared. There were scientific priorities, and the concept of archiving the work came about. In 20th century, there was, however, a huge increase in the scientific research after the Second World War. So the commercial publishers took over, and then we had an era of electronic publishing. Today we had 20,000 journals sharing the scientific discoveries of more than 6 million scientists in academia and industry, and it's believed to be a $9 billion annual revenue. The issues in 21st century kept on increases. There were general crises. There was an impact of the economic slowdown. We had an idea and more concept about the impact factor of the journal. Open access publishing came into play, and then there was social web. Now let's see who are the players in the scholarly communication. We have publishers, we have university publishers, societies, libraries, and we have the users in the form of the scholars. Then we have funders who are actually paying to buy those journals and university libraries. The basic question, why publish? Because you want to report the results of a research project. You want to establish the priority that you were the first one to do it, to get more funding, to disseminate the result, and to have the peer review and get a quality control. Now, how does it work? Traditionally, the scholars are the people who are working in different academic institutes. They create the information by carrying out the research. They then go to the publishers to produce and package this information, and libraries then purchase this information from the publishers, organize it, and provide access to these publications, which allows the dissemination of scholarly information and continued use of it. Now, if we look at this flow chart here in the traditional based journal, here is the author. He submits the article to the journal. The editor will get it peer reviewed by the referees. Referees send it back to editor. Editor sends it back to the author. Author revises it and back to the editor. It goes to the publisher, which used to do the sub-editing and go to the journal, and the reader, which actually may be author's own university, would have to pay a price to read their own work. So before the desktop era, most of the work, as you can see here, was being done by the publishing house, because after the initial review, the editing, production, marketing, and distribution was all done by the publisher. So publisher had a major role to play in the pre-desktop era. But now, we have more and more work being done by the authors. You have authoring, review, editing, production to some extent, all taken over by the authors, and the publisher's role is restricted to mainly marketing and distribution. So these are generally the interactions which we have in the traditional publishing world. And as we can see, most of the revenue is generated at the level of the publishers. So the traditional based journal actually includes 90% of the scientific journal, which includes both the top ranking as well as some of the low impact counterpart journals. These journals charge their readers, individuals and universities, and complement their earnings from advertisement, online, or be it on glossy paper. It is still believed to be the most veteran and common method of payment because universities and authors actually pay to buy back their own work. But two things have changed. One is the digitization, and second is 250% increase in the subscription of these traditional journals. So there was a memo by the Harvard University saying that journal subscriptions are now so high that to continue them would seriously erode collection efforts in many other areas already compromised. So Harvard University says it cannot afford journal publishers' prices and it wants scientists to make its research open access and resign from publishing that keeps articles behind the paywall. So in the era of digitization, where authors are doing more and more work and we have net tools to assess it, we are progressing towards a journal which is more of an open access or e-based journal rather than the traditional journal. And the background to the open access is this. It is basically the high payment by the journal, so-called journal crisis, akin to economic crisis, plus the internet. Researchers and the information specialists worldwide began to see a potential solution in 1990s, and open access was found to be a new way of organizing the distribution of scientific information. Why would you need an open access? Open access actually means the free availability on the public internet, so anybody can read, download, copy, distribute, print, search any of the articles you want. So even most of the traditional journals, which we so-called traditional journals, are moving towards open access because this is the need of the hour. We have journals which are purely open access, and we have hybrid journals which have a hard copy as well as are available on open access as well. Now let's see where the traditional journals stand today. What are the advantages of traditional journals? If you know, a lot of academics' life is actually tied up to getting published in those high-impact journals, and they are still published by conventional subscription publishers. So there is still a lot of value attached to those journals. And secondly, most of the researchers do not actually mind giving away their copyright to the publishers, which again makes it easier for them to carry on because we are giving our copyright, we are giving our material and everything because they are still the high-impact journals. But there are lots of disadvantages because they are not producing any material, they are not employing the people who are writing the paper, they don't employ people who review the paper, they don't employ people who edit the paper. So all the work, academic work, is being done free of cost to them, and they don't even spread the knowledge freely even to the authors. Sometimes you have to pay even if you want to buy your own reprints, because otherwise you cannot get the reprints of your own article. And the universities are the institutes which actually pay on an average 20 people for 1 to 2 years to get that work published, has to buy back that work from the publisher. This is the cartoon by the PLOS One, which is you will see in the subsequent talks. The owner of the PLOS One says how it started. His wife fell sick, and in the middle of the night he wanted some urgent information, and he realized that there was no way he could get that information sitting in the hospital. So he wrote, "Here I was, a scientist with ability to read, interpret, and understand many of these papers, but I just could not access them." So open access, you will hear in the subsequent talks, is going to solve all these issues which were the shortcomings of the traditional research. It also encourages transdisciplinary research because If I am going to do something on the genetics, I'm not going to pay $30 to download each paper if I want 200 papers. But if it is open to me, I would definitely go through them and read them. So, comparing the open access versus the traditional journals, there was a study in the British Medical Journal of Medicine in 2012, which indicated that open access journals which are indexed in the web are actually approaching the same scientific impact as the traditional journals are. So is traditional journal publishing a thing of past? Maybe not today, but future, of course, it would be a thing of past as it appears now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vishali. And I wanted a permission whether I can take your presentation, whether for the Indian, we can put it in the website.
It's already loaded, so.
Okay, only thing, Radhika, you have to find a way how to take it. And the second is, I'm happy you spoke the plus points of open access, but I think once upon a time, open access was looked down, I think, and now I think I'm happy it's coming back. In spite of that, it is paining me that our impact factors are not getting better, which it's my personal problem as an editor, but I need the editorial board to help me, and I am sure even Dr. Vishanji just said he will help me, and I know you are also outside, but you will help us. But in the meantime, what do you recommend for our Indian postgraduates, where we have made it available in tablet, in the Android, in the iPhone, but we see the number of people using are outside India more than Indians.
Absolutely.
And I think all the Indian doctors are using SMS, WhatsApp, and internet on the phone. But I don't know how to initiate, at least read Indian journal, which is directly, which they can benefit. So you have any idea? You also deal with a lot of young postgraduates and PGI.
I think if you don't really need WhatsApp, if you have internet on your phone or on your iPad or anything and you want to access anything, I would do it, irrespective of whether I have WhatsApp for that or not.
No. What I'm saying, they are using WhatsApp where it's a waste of time, but they are not using the journal. How to stimulate them to read?
We have to increase the impact factor of our journal.
Okay. We have Dr. Chandra and Abraham there. So any comments, sir? Dr. Radhika, you want to say something? Yeah. And Vishal, you can come and join us here if you have time.
I have a session.
Okay, right.
Hi, Dr. Vishali. I'm Dr. Radhika. Actually, all along I've also been very actively supporting open access. But when it comes to submitting our own articles to make it open access, it's pretty expensive. When we get an option of whether we want the article to be available as an open access, we as authors have to bear the cost. And I think with IGO, of course, we are very lucky because, the cost is all borne. But for open access publishing, it's the author who has to bear the cost. That's going to be tough.
I agree. But even to buy the reprints, we had to bear the cost in traditional journals. If I want to buy the reprint of my own paper, I have to pay $500 to buy the reprints. So it's either ways, I'm sure all these issues would be sorted out now with the more open access coming. And when the open access journals have like PLOS ONE, all of us are happy in publishing PLOS ONE because it has a high impact factor. So as the e-based journals will gain popularity and the universities would change their policy and make the payment for the authors, I'm sure it's going to pick up.
I would like to comment on Dr. Radhika's issue on pricing. Definitely paying, I think, 1,375, if I'm not wrong, for PLOS ONE, it's difficult. But if we look at alternatives, if we look at avenues to generate that kind of revenue, it's not very difficult. First of all, many journals, they have divided, even PLOS ONE, the categories into three sort of strata there. So if you are, for example, from a developing world, I think India comes in category B. So you don't have to pay 1,375. I'm sure about this. Journals like BMC, they always have the Hinari program where you can actually communicate with the editor-in-chief and see if you can submit your article at a reasonable price, which is less than $500. Thirdly, if journals like PLOS ONE, if you go into the details of instructions to the authors, you can anyways communicate with the editor-in-chief explaining your predicament that you will not be able to pay that much, and there is a possibility that they'll cut it down even further. I know people who have done that, so it's not very difficult. And last but not the least, I don't know how possible that is, but you have seen we use a lot of resources, especially the industry resources, to do this, to do a lot of things, to organize meetings, to organize probably scientific trips or whatever. If we are that keen, I'm sure you can organize the industry, organize the funding provided by the industry to a certain extent into publishing. Most of the industry sponsors, they are okay to sponsor a part of that money that you have to pay for getting your article published in an open access journal. So what I mean to say, the gist is that there are ways out. You can get people to work in that direction. Thank
Plus,
you.
we have all along paid for colored reproduction. I mean, so many times we have paid for the traditional journals.
Like, I agree with you.
$1,000 just to
yes.
get your pictures published in color.
Yeah, but many journals, for example, BJO, they'll have this option clearly written that if you don't want your photographs to be published in color in print, the color production online is still free of cost, which I think is again a very reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, which is the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vishali, for.
So the next speaker for this session is Professor Natarajan. He'll be talking about new tools, new face of journals. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vishanji, and thank Dr. Ramurthy for giving this session. So new tools, new face of journals. So this is the first editor, Dr. S.N. Cooper, who ran the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology from 1952 to 1973 at KEM Hospital in Mumbai, followed by late Dr. S.R.K. Malik, who managed the journal from 1974 to 79, and then later Dr. Madan Mohan, 1980 to 1986, Dr. Tony Fernandez in 1987 to 91, and in between a year, Dr. T.P. Tera, and followed by Dr. G.N. Rao from 93 to 98, and Dr. Tarap Das from 99 to 2004, and Dr. B.K. Nayak from 2005 to 10, and currently, till date, I am managing. So publishing a research article. So why write and publish research papers? Ideally, to share research findings and discoveries with the hope of improving healthcare, practically to get funding, to get promoted, to get a job, to keep a job. And scientists are rated by what they finish and not what they attempt. And why should you publish in Indian Journal of Ophthalmology? The Indian Journal of Ophthalmology has a circulation of about 14,000 print copies, which go to almost every ophthalmologist in the country, besides various libraries world over. And chances of being recognized for their work among Indian fraternity, a place where they can be identified most. It is important to note that most Indian researchers conduct their study on an Indian population. And AIOC has adopted the policy of open access, wherein anyone can view and download the full text of any article published in Indian Journal of Ophthalmology free of charge. And we are the first open access ophthalmology journal to be having an iPad app. And free online articles have been found to be cited more often. Secondly, literature search is not restricted by library budget or even a personal budget. Researchers from the developing world will not be handicapped due to the poor economic state of their country. Researchers prefer to publish their works in journals with a high impact factor, and AIOC is included in the Science Citation Index, and first impact factor in July 2011 was 0.8, later it was 1.019, and this year it's 0.7. And submitting to journal in the Indian Journal, convenience in manuscript submission, The complete processing of manuscript is all online, smooth and transparent. Authors can track the progress of the manuscript, reduce the processing time of the manuscript. And competition for space in journals is intense. The rejection rate varies in various journals from 50 to 65% and up to 90% in Nature. And major reasons for rejection: conformity, poor experimental design, poor controls, hypothesis not adequately tested, inappropriate for that particular journal or our own IGO, or whether poorly written. And so hence, know the journal, its editors, and why you submitted the paper there. Pay close attention to spelling, grammar, and punctuation. Make sure references are comprehensive and accurate. Avoid careless mistakes. Read and conform to instruction for authors. And our Indian Journal of Ophthalmology motto is publish or perish. And what makes a good research paper is good science, good writing, publication in good journals. And impact factor, the average number of times published papers are cited up to 2 years after publication. Immediacy index is the average number of times published papers are cited during year of publication. And time to write the paper. Has a significant advancement been made? Is the hypothesis straightforward? Did the experiment test the hypothesis? Are the controls appropriate and sufficient? Can you describe the study in 1 or 2 minutes? Can the key message be written in 1 or 2 sentences? Those who have the most to say usually say it with the fewest words. Things to consider: that tables and figures must be clear and concise, should be self-explanatory. Read references will help in choosing journal, better insight into possible reviewers. And study instructions to authors, think about possible reviewers, quality of journal studied by impact factor, tentative title and summary, and choose authors. So this authorship, each author should have participated sufficiently in the work to take responsibility for the content, and this participation must include conception or design or analysis and interpretation of data, or both, drafting the article or revising it for critically important intellectual content, and final approval of the version to be published. Participation solely in the collection of data does not justify authorship. All elements of an article critical to its main conclusion must be attributable to at least one author. There is no way to get experience except through experience. And the new features, there are several features that have been started in 2005 onwards, and in 2008 and 11 we have updated the personalized IGO copy, e-alerts, EPAP, the ETOC. And now, along with the full text download of each issue, IGO iPad allows the user to view multimedia videos, images, supplements, store or delete download issues, speedy view for the issues. And you can scroll quickly through abstract, receive notification about new issues, link to the journal website for additional reading and searching, archiving, etc. It's also available on the smartphone, on the iPad, also on the Android phones, and also in the various learning. Each article has a quick response code, so you can download decoders for QRC, and you can read the article in the mobile anywhere, so you don't have to key in the word. And IGO especially makes sense a personalized journal to each member, and the e-table of contents give you a glimpse on what's in store. And we also we released the IAPB special issue on prevention of blindness. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And if you have any question, maybe we can discuss after Dr. Vishal's paper, and I think Vishal will speak on his talk. No, who's the next one?
I'm the next
You are going to speak?
No, I'm the next one.
You are speaking? Yeah. Okay. Dr. Vishal will speak.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Natarajan, for that kind invite. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here, to be associated with the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology in any sense. I'll be talking briefly about something that we short hypothesis that we tested last year sometimes. I'll be talking mainly about the importance of advanced online publications and its impact on the overall readability of the journal. Now, as the first speaker had mentioned, whatever changes that have occurred in traditional publishing, some basics have still remained the same. You always have to ask the right question when you formulate your study plan. The methodology has to be reproducible. That is the key word. The data collection and analysis has to be robust. There's no two-way about that. The manuscript writing has to be clear and concise. What most of us neglect is that nowadays the journals do not like your 3,000, 4,000 words article if you can concise the whole thing into 2,000 words. And if you go into the instructions for authors of most of the ophthalmology journals, the upper limit is between 2,000 to 2,500, except the ones in basic sciences where you can actually jump up to 3,500. But one of the most important things is to identify an appropriate journal for your submission. So an appropriate journal would probably be the one where your article is, the people are happy to accept your article. They'll publish it in no time, and also the readership has to be very good. You'll have to see whether your scientific work fits into the scope of the journal. If you have done work at the super specialized level, it should go into that particular journal preferably. But a good journal is a little more than an appropriate journal. If you ask anyone who publishes a lot, a good journal is the one that accepts your articles at a regular basis. But yes, in addition to that, there are quite a few things. One of the most commonly used parameter is impact factor of the journal, which is a measure that denotes the average number of citations to articles published in that particular journal. For example, if the number of times articles published in year 2000 and 2006 and 7 were cited by Index Journal during 2008, and B is the total number of those citable items, then the impact factor for the year 2008 would be A over B. As of today, in fact, as of yesterday, this is the screenshot from the Journal of Citation Reports from the Thomson Reuters website. I've arranged that alphabetically. So you can actually see the impact factor in column 4. This is one of the parameters, as I said. Of course, there are other important things such as five-year impact factor and MEJC index, which are more commonly used nowadays. Ophthalmology still leads the crowd. The only ophthalmic journal with an impact factor of more than 5, and it leads the whole crowd. Archives and AJO, they fall back to 3.82 and 3.62 respectively. In terms of basic sciences, in fact, investigative ophthalmology and visual sciences, it's still top of the list with 3.44, and experimental eye research has recently come up with an impact factor of 3.02. Another thing that we thought is important is the speed of publication. Now, it has been shown and published in non-ophthalmology journals that the publication time lag of a journal may have an impact on an author's decision to submit his or her work to that particular journal. We also know that, fortunately or unfortunately, studies with positive findings, with striking findings, they'll be published before or in preference to the articles which have findings otherwise. This is what we call as publication bias. It does exist. And, well, if you think deeper, delays in publication can potentially have an adverse effect on patient outcomes. So advanced online publication, which was introduced only a few years back, it was done in order to make the publications available right after acceptance. So what the journal does is, as soon as your paper is accepted, you are sent proofs, usually in less than 2 weeks, depending on what journal are you talking about, and then they will publish the corrected proof online. Now, these copies of your articles, they are available on the National Library of Medicine website, commonly known as PubMed. They are very much citation-enabled. Interval between submission and publication may determine again the probability to which an article can raise the impact factor of the journal. Of course, this has been shown in non-ophthalmology journals. So where do we stand? We recently looked at the publication time lag in ophthalmology journals. So what we did was we went back and chose 2010 as the year which we wanted to evaluate. So we picked up all the ophthalmology journals which are listed on the JCR, Journal of Citation Reports, Thomson Reuters website. We picked up the issues from every month. From each month, we picked up the first clinical article that was published, and then we basically recorded the details regarding the date of submission, date of acceptance, date of publication, and date of advanced online publication. We'll specifically look at the publication time lag in ophthalmology journals. We compared advanced online publication time lag with the print publication time lag. We also looked at the impact factor of the journals which had advanced online publication facility. And we correlated, we actually saw if there is any correlation between the publication time as well as the impact factors. We had some interesting findings. 51 journals were included. That was in 2010. All of you know the numbers have gone up by about 15 to 20% by now. The median peer review time for all the ophthalmology journals was 133 days, whereas the median publication time was an additional 100 days. Advanced online publication was only available for 51% of journals. That was in 2010. Numbers have gone up now. The most significant finding was the journals with advanced online publication had higher impact factor as compared to those without it. And as expected, the median time from acceptance to online publication was significantly less as compared to the median time between acceptance and print publication. So we came to the conclusion that advanced online publication definitely provides rapid access to the articles. It does facilitate more citations and indirectly influences the impact factor of a journal. Obviously, it is very useful because you can disseminate your scientific work easily and early. If you work in a university system, you are in an academic institute, you will see that delays in these publications can, in a long term, adversely affect your institutional's financial status and the distribution of public funding that your institution is entitled to every year. So the take-home message is, faster is better. Average publication delays of a journal are very important, primarily for the development of citation statistics for that journal in this particular field, and it is prudent to choose a journal based on its average time to publication. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Vishanji. And the next speaker is ready. Dr. Radhika, next speaker ready. You can come here. You have anybody wants to ask anything? By the time she keeps her presentation ready. She is from Medno Walter Kluwer, who are the publishers of Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. Thank you, Dr. Vishanji.
That was interesting data.
Thank you so much. Maybe you can give some comments before you start your talk on this.
I like that comparative, that was done for 51 journals.
Yes, there were only 51 journals listed at that point of time, so we included all of them. It was a huge piece of work, but it took us about 8 to 9 months to collect all the data.
But it is good information,
It was. We were quite happy we could publish it in ophthalmology, and there was an editorial done by the previous editor-in-chief, Professor Shachad, and that's where we got the faster is better thing.
Yeah, I know. So thank you, everybody, and I'm Dr. Geetika, representing Walter Kluwer Medno. We're the official publishers for AIOC. So I'm actually not talking about Medno today, so to say, but I'm trying to touch a very different aspect of publishing, which is the industry's perspective rather than the academician's perspective. A quick, introduction to my company. It is the leading medical publisher in the world, and Walter Kluwer, Medno is part of the Walter Kluwer Health portfolio. And we publish around 320 open access journals. A little while back, there was a whole presentation on the open access. So, we support that with 320 journals. And I think at present, we've even crossed the numbers mark of Biomed Central in terms of numbers of journals. So, scientific publishing or academic publishing actually has three components. The academic journal, the journal publishers themselves, then the libraries which house these journals for the use of the scholars and students, and the faculty and scholars themselves who actually create the content which goes into these journals. So it's a very unique industry, unlike many other industries where the academia is not an active part of the process. In the journal publishing industry, the academia is a very, very important part of the entire process because they are the content developers themselves. They are the people who are responsible for the scientific output. So the scholarly publishing relies upon an unusual economic model. There are three important participants in this industry. The faculty or the scholars who write the articles and also provide the editorial services. The publishers who probably just act as the middlemen. Their role is actually in the vetting of the content that is created by the scholars, and the colleges and universities that ultimately purchase these journals as a source of information for their scholars and students. So, the important thing that we need to understand is that as academicians and scholars, why do people participate in this process? So the incentive that the faculty and scholars have to participate in this cycle is actually twofold. First is the norms of the profession strongly encourage faculty members to participate in the generation and dissemination of the new knowledge. And as I think rightly pointed out by one of you, that it is the completion of the work that is important rather than what was the task initiated in the first, in the beginning. And secondly is the academic process of promotion and other things are also dependent on what kind of scholarly articles that you've published during your career. So because of these two prominent reasons, it is imperative for the scholars and faculty members to become a part of this publishing process. So I was looking at some data and I came up with these numbers that each year scientific publishers handle over 3 million submitted articles, coordinate the work of more than 300,000 peer reviewers, and publish over 1.5 million articles. I think that's a huge number. So publishing industry today is actually under a revamp. Why? First reason is acceleration in research, and there is this new concept of open access. So this is because there is a need for openness and dissemination. So why is acceleration in research happening? Because there are more frequent collaborations between groups of researchers. There is more competition. There is a possibility to have access and assessment of each other's work. And international, communication and, networks have become more stronger and more accessible. So that is why the international framework for doing more studies is possible. Why we are looking at openness and dissemination is because open research content is becoming the need of the day because more and more people are collaborating and more people want access to information. There are new formats of publishing which are coming up. The digital world has opened, a lot of new models of reaching the content to the users. There are new business models which have come up in the closed domain, which is the subscription model, and also in the open domain. And the global governmental policies and access to information is also changing with time. So with these two, the publishing industry, is actually going through a lot of changes in the recent past. So just briefly talking about the evolution of the open access model. It's been initiated, it had been initiated by the librarians. People who worked in the journal publishing must have heard about these, the Scope 3 initiative, which was started by the CERN libraries way back in the 90s. against the high price model of Elsevier journals. So that's how the librarians initiated the entire concept of open access. Later, it spread to the scientific community. Then the government took stand, and they created rules and laws, to make scientific information easily accessible. Funding agencies understood the importance of free flow of information, and they also pitched in. And this brought a lot of, important relief to the users, and ultimately the publishers also understood the need of time and became a part of the process. And that is why, a lot of publishers either, started an entire OA initiative, or, also had some of its regular journals have an OA section. So this is how the journals evolved during the, last maybe 50 odd years. All the journal publishing dates back to 600 years back. When the first journal was published, it was a physics journal, and it was published by the House of Elsevier. One of the oldest journals, is almost 600 years old. So from print journals to online, to the PDFs, to the devices, and I think we're almost on the cloud now. So what is it, the value that what the publishers bring to the journals? How do they enhance the value of the journals? So the publishers, do market research on what customers want. They increase, the viability of a journal by increasing the revenue, and also search collaborations on how to get journals more, viable on their own. They also advise the editorial offices on which sales channels and markets will the journal cover. What new products are uniquely poised to create and develop around the journal. They expand the accessibility online for the journal, and they convert journal into an application form for easy reach and accessibility. So they bring a lot of value in terms of both quality and accessibility of the content. So I'll quickly talk about the digital revolution. Technology when needed the most. So as Dr. Natarajan just pointed out, that IJO has, an Android, an iPad, and also a method of where you can actually access your article of choice through your mobile phone. So all that has come about because of the digitization that has happened in the recent past. So this digitization has actually helped transform the traditional print copies into, a device-based digital world today. So quickly, I will also talk a little bit about trends in the open access publishing. Very interesting data, although this data is till about August 2012, and I'm, waiting for some updates to come, because usually the market updates are available only towards the middle of the next year. So this data was collected last year to August 2013. So quickly I'll run you through these important points. OA continues to rise. 2015 projections of 352,000 OA articles annually. Approximate total revenues for OA journal publication is $172 million, which in 2012, a 34% increase from $128 million in 2011. The only segment of journals that I've excluded from this is the geophysical sciences. 1,634 health/life sciences journals were added in the last year itself. Okay. 8,007 peer-reviewed OA journals listed in the directory of open access journals till August 2012, which actually calculates to 3 OA journals added every day. And I'm assuming that the latest data will increase it to a higher number. So this is the traditional model to the open access model. So what you actually get at the end of the day is the instant access to knowledge and information. The big players in the open access market: Public Library of Science, Wolters Kluwer Health, Biomed, Spark Europe, and some articles from Sage, some journals from Sage as well. So since we were talking about quality of content and how to keep the quality of content high even with open access, these are the indexing bodies that, if they index your journals and you are a part of these databases, then, and somehow it is ensured that your content is good. Thank you.
In the last slide, can I have the last slide?
Last slide?
Yeah.
I think they've closed.
Yeah. Like you said, the content and indexing agents of various things you have given.
Yes.
How can Indian Journal be enhanced in this sort of...
So I think IJO is almost on all of these websites already.
Right.
Yes.
And the previous one more slide, one back.
These are the bigger publishers which are operating in the open access space.
Thank you. Have any comments, Vishani?
No, I think if you look at the last slide again, which was pretty interesting, Google is still working a lot in providing free and open access publications. There are sometimes, if you go and look for a particular article through the journal website and it is paid and you don't want to get if you don't have an open access to that, you can still try and Google it, and somehow or the other you will be redirected to the full text of the article, which is quite useful in some cases, although it might not be legal all the time. But yes, Google Scholar is something that is pretty much coming up, even for looking at other parameters such as impact factor of the journal or H-index of the particular author. I think Google is still the way to go in the next few years.
Yeah, it's a resource which is very, very handy. Yeah. Although, the H-index concept came out with Scopus, but Scholar also uses the same and sometimes even gives you a very high H-index as compared to Scopus.
Yes, because Google Scholar will try and include everything else as well, even if your article gets cited in a local magazine.
Absolutely.
But if you look at the importance of Scopus, it has again gone down because most of the universities, they will not look at Scopus H-index. They will still be looking at the Web of Science.
Yes, there's
which
no
is even lower than Scopus. Yeah.
Yes, but the parameter, the indexing and the bibliometric parameters, I mean, impact factor or H-index or EGIN factor or many others that are there, each one independently is actually not a criteria for quality of content.
Of course.
What you have to actually look at from the journal's perspective is that, you are able to do each one of them and, kind of come up with a cumulative process in place to improve the journal further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. I'm here.
Hello. Ma'am, I'm in government job. Actually, we have rules now that we should have at least 4 publications for next promotions. So, how to know the authenticity of the journal when it is on e-journal especially? Actually, I've got 2-3 mails. I don't know the names of that journals and they are asking me whether you are having any papers to publish. So,
actually,
how to know by the front page that this is an authentic journal?
Correct. So that's the bane of, resources being freely available at times. You have to be doubly sure, you check, cross-check, or even actually try and see if you know those people through some other people before actually submitting your article. Because sometimes these are a ploy to get money also.
But I recommend you to use only Indian Journal of Ophthalmology.
That is what we are doing, sir. But what they are doing is giving a very prompt reply and doing everything. I have published in IJO also. But when they are asking, so how do we know that they are not the one?
I agree. But in spite of that...
ISNN number is EISNN number.
Sorry?
He's asking you a question.
I didn't get that. I was sorry.
Ma'am, to be an index journal, that in the job, what the colleagues are talking about, that it should have a EISNN number.
Yes,
so
that's one way to look.
It is a authentic number or not?
See, you would not be able to find that out, whether they have just put some number or it is a real number. So it's only through the
journals and they are
it is only through the editorial board members that you see the names of on that journal that you could possibly find out whether that journal really exists.